If life was to be boiled down into one four-letter word for you right now, what would that word be? This is a question I have asked hundreds of people from all over the world, and they've given me some responses. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to participate and to share yours as well. Now, here's why. Because as Dr. Sham said, I'm here to share my four-letter word, a word that has guided everything I do, really in every moment. It's something that's accessible to us all right here, right now, with no added resources. You and what you have is enough. And it's enough to make your life better. It's a process that has been sought out by leaders of countries and companies to make their organizations, their countries, everything best. So now let's warm up. I've given you a little prep. I've given you some examples. I want to hear your four-letter word. So on the count of 4, you're going to warm up your vocal cords and just go, ah. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah! You're a great crowd. Okay, now we're gonna do that again, and you're gonna shout your four-letter word. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah! Okay, good. Well done. 2 four-letter words. Ready for mine? Play. Play. The thing we all do from a very early age, instinctively. And yet, as we grow up, we lose this ability to add play to everything or anything. You see, kids, they don't have this problem. They can add play to things like they add sprinkles to their ice cream. So today, I want to make it incredibly easy for you. Easy is a four-letter word. And I have 4 steps, each which can be boiled down into 4 four-letter words. And using this process to whatever your word was, will make it best. Because here's the simple formula. Life plus play will equal your best life. Okay, to begin, I want everybody to stand up, please. And I want you to put your palms out, up. Now take your right index finger and put it in the palm of the person to your right. So everybody should have a finger in a palm and then an open palm. Okay, well done. Now, on the count of 4, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're going to try to grab the finger in your left palm while not having your own finger grabbed. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, some of you got it, some of you didn't. Let's try it again. I know counting on 4 is a new thing too. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Well done, you can take a seat. Congratulations. You just began the first step in this play methodology. And that is that we joined. You see, what you just experienced was an actual distinct biological shift. Not only in your physiology, but actually in your biochemistry. By touching somebody around you, your body started producing the hormone oxytocin. And in that, your body started primping itself to be in a state of trust and empathy with others. And why is that important? Well, as Dr. Stuart Brown of the National Institute of Play writes, play puts us in sync with others. And it's when we're in sync, that's a 4-letter word, both mentally, biologically, socially, then dramatic results are able to be accomplished. Essentially, the seemingly impossible becomes possible. This was best demonstrated to me by a girl in 6th grade named Cardi. Cardi had a problem because she had a good friend who was sick. Kajal had a rare disease that required a bone marrow transplant. And Cardi came home with this shocking news and the statistic that Kajal had a 1 in 20,000 chance of finding a match. Now, as an adult, when I heard this news, I thought, impossible. I thought we shouldn't even try anything because that's just going to set us up for failure. Cardi asked a different question. Cardi asked, well, how can we bring 20,000 people together so we can find our match? And so she took to the streets. She rallied her family around her, and then her school, and then went to the university, and then went to the town. Eventually, they had a newscaster following them around for 24 hours straight to cover the fun, the joy, the enthusiasm that they brought to finding a match for their friend. People even asked, "Aren't you being disrespectful? I mean, there's a sick child." And luckily, a parent was wise enough to say, "No, that's exactly what we want to do. We hope our joy, our enthusiasm, our singing is heard all the way in the hospital bed, hundreds of miles away." And do you know what the result of this joining was? Cardi and her movement didn't just find one match for their friend, they found 5. They didn't just break a world record for the number of registrants in a 24-hour period into the bone marrow registry. They broke the mindset of every adult there, myself included. And by adding more than 8,000 people into the bone marrow registry, to this date, they've saved more than 12 lives, and that number is only growing. This is the power of joining. So it begs the question, because join plus play equals your best life. So we're joined together. That's great. We're primed, we're ready biologically, mentally, emotionally. But then what? Well, step number 2 really comes from a company I've had the privilege to work with for more than 6 years called Resilient Families Institute. And this is a company that has been hired to help families connect and bond and have fun. Essentially, it's hired to transform relationships and strained relationships already. And they are the ones that actually produce this play methodology that we're going through and learning about today. And they do this second step brilliantly. What is it? Flip. Now, you might think that I'm going to ask you to do a somersault, and I think that would be a lot of fun, but I also don't mean it exactly in that way. You see, when we join together, when we come into any social interaction, we all assume particular roles. And when we talk about flip, it's these roles that we want to flip. As renowned family therapist and strategic interventionist Chloe Madonis once said, when habitual patterns are interrupted, new choices become available. And it is exactly these new choices that we want and that we need for transformational change. So Resilient Families Institute, when they have an event, they demonstrate the flipping by one rule. Whenever a family comes, they greet the child first. They look them in the eye and say, "Guess what? Today, this event, you are in charge." And inevitably, I've seen it hundreds of times, the child's eyes blow up, and then they look to the dad or the mom or both and say, "Did you hear that?" They need validation, like, really, this is about to happen. And sure enough, because of this, both relationships are able to change. As John Brantley, co-founder of Resilient Families Institute, says, by doing this flip, it takes the parent out of the tell, fix, control mode and puts them into the guide, coach, and listen mode. It's then, in compressed amount of times, that we see the transformation. A great example of this happens continuously, but I'll give you one. And that was during what we called the Great Race. So imagine this. It's 16 stations scattered usually throughout the woods, throughout a camp environment, and the child has to take the lead. Well, I was watching this once, and it was a boy. He was young, probably around 8, and he was the youngest of his family, but he was there just that weekend with his dad. And his dad was rather controlling, but his dad was smart enough to play by our rules for a little bit. So here's this boy, and we've given him a map. Now this boy arrived, and he literally turned to me and goes, "Did you know there's such things as maps?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is a generation that has only grown up with GPS, and they've never gone outside of the GPS radius. And here we are handing him a map and saying, guide your father around." So here he is. And the dad turns to the son and goes, "Okay, son, where do you want to go?" And he goes, "I want to go here." Now, mind you, the map is upside down, so we know we're not really getting anywhere. And the dad goes, great, how do we get there? And the son goes, well, we go that way. Dad goes, great, and enthusiastically, joyfully runs off with the boy. And then about 5 minutes later, we see them screaming around the corner. And the son is waving the map in his hand. It's up, right side up this time. And he's saying, I figured it out! I figured it out! And right on his heels is his dad, grinning just as big. You see, in that short amount of time, just that 5 minutes, it was that flip that allowed for that transformation to happen. It was a flip that allowed the son to rise up and for the father to see that, both then winning. And that is because flip plus play will equal your best life. Well, now that we know that, that's awesome. But there's a problem. And that is that flip doesn't often happen because it's uncomfortable. We push ourselves a bit when we flip our roles. It's outside of our comfort zone. So now I'm going to ask all of you to sit up actively in your chair. This is going to be an easy exercise. Just wake us up. You're all good. Okay. I think everybody in this room can do this. I'm going to ask you to copy me. Make this face. Make this face. Make this face. Okay. Well done, some of you. But some of you really actually didn't do that well. Why? You know, like I said, that was an easy exercise, something I think we're all capable of. But it wasn't easy. It was actually hard. Because while you physically could do it, what I was actually asking you to do was take a risk. A risk to do something you're not expected to do normally. A risk to push yourself, to maybe look silly. You know, somewhere along the line, like I mentioned earlier, as adults, we're not willing to take those playful risks. But it's exactly that will create the change we want. This was best shown to me really recently when I met two people, both diagnosed with cancer. Adam was the son of somebody that I know, and he had been diagnosed with leukemia and started his chemotherapy. And so, shocked and not knowing what I could do, I made dinner. I brought the casserole. I wrote notes, and I know they appreciated it. I got it. They were really grateful. But I tiptoed around that problem. I realized I didn't do what I'm preaching right now around that. And that was shown to me because of George. George is a 13-year-old who had moved to America 8 months ago. And in this time span, he learned he had bone cancer and started his chemotherapy treatment. And how did his friends react back in Brazil? They shaved their heads. They made a video of them shaving their heads and then jumping over a couch and showing, listen, you're going to break through this, I'm going to break through this. We're in this together. They took a risk. And guess what? Then not only his closest 13 friends did it, then more classmates did it. Girls in the class started shaving their heads. It was like an epidemic, just shaving their heads. And the local news picked up on the story. And then the national Brazil news started playing this video. And then his cousin over in England said, well, I need to do something. So they reached out to his favorite football team, he's a big soccer player, and got them all to sign a jersey for him. And then in America, they were like, well, what can we do? So they said, we're going to flip it. We're going to grow beards. And here you have 3 continents backing George. And they all took risks. They all stepped out of what they typically do, playfully. So when I learned this, I realized, wow, what I did was one 4-letter word, and that is lame. I did not plus play to that. So I want to change that right here and right now. I'm going to invite all of you to join in me in taking a bit of a risk, because we have no idea how this is going to work out. And have the opportunity to give to George, to Adam, to anybody whose four-letter word might be pain or hurt or something hard. So you're all prepped, you're all ready. You sat up actively in your chairs, we did a little facial exercises. Now, we're gonna do this. We're gonna take a risk. And here's how it's gonna work. On the count of 3, because you weren't that good at 4s earlier, and I want this to work, we are going to not be smiling, and I'm gonna go 1, 2, and then we're all gonna give the biggest smile we can possibly give, like we're smiling for those people who need a smile, okay? We're gonna listen for it. So, ready? 1, 2. Did you hear that? We heard a smile. We transformed that. You always think you can only see a smile. We heard it. And we took a risk. I didn't know how that was going to work. I had my backup about failure there. But this is exactly what we need to do. We need to use what we have right here, right now, who we are, and play with it. And then that can be the greatest gift for people. You see, because risk plus play will equal your best life. So now we've done it. We've done the first 3 steps of this intentional play. What's number 4? Well, you've actually been doing that too. Because number 4 is talk. After you go through all these adventures, all this change, we have to come together and share. You see, for centuries, for as long as human civilization that I know, we have sat around campfires, sharing stories, sharing wisdom, laughing together, joining together. And I propose that this is our modern day campfire. That we get to come together in places like this and warm by the stories and the fire. We get to become sparked and then spread that further and further along. You see, we have to take the experience and process it. But process it in a way of celebration, of fun, of ritual. And I am so grateful that we can do that even here, right now. Because talk plus play will equal your best life. So now you've done it. You've done all the 4 steps of this intentional play. And now I want you to think back to that 4-letter word that you yelled out. And I want you to think about who can you join with in play to do this? What role can you flip here? And what risks are you willing to take? But finally, how are you going to share it? How are you going to talk about it? Because it's our commitment right here to plus play to life. Thank you.